Well, welcome back. President Trump formally notifying Congress that the U.S. is again engaged in military action against Iran, triggering a 60-day period under the War Powers Resolution before congressional authorization is required. A new wave of U.S. strikes hitting Iran early this morning, marking a third night in a row of attacks. U.S. Central Command says the 5-hour mission last night targeted Iranian air defenses, missile sites, and drone facilities. The military says these sites were targeted to further degrade Iran's ability to hit ships in the Strait of Hormuz. The conflict with Iran increasing the urgency for defense tech innovation and the need to ensure America maintains its military edge in future conflicts. Joining me now is Pennsylvania Senator Dave McCormick. Senator, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. And, of course, you are coming to us live from the 2026 Pennsylvania Defense and Innovation Summit. You are hosting it. You're kicking it off today. And President Trump is expected to headline tomorrow with a speech. Tell us what's on the agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Well, I left the Senate floor last night and drove up to Carlisle, Pennsylvania. A sad farewell to my friends. We were really missing Lindsey Graham. It's hard to be here at the War College talking about America's peace through strength without thinking about Lindsey and what a strong voice he was for freedom and America's military and America's strength around the world. So I want to start with that. What's happening here is incredibly special. We're at the U.S. Army War College. President Trump will be the 4th president in American history to visit here. And we have about 1,300 participants. We have over 600 companies represented. We have over 500 C-level executives. And this is all about the transformation that needs to take place to make sure America remains the strongest military in the world. And that means we have to change the way we do business. It means we need to change the people at the table. We've got CEOs of all the defense contractors. We have major investors. We have labor here at the table. We have university presidents. We, of course, have the president and many from his cabinet. It's a really important thing. It's a really important moment. And what's happening here, I think, is going to be the point of the spear for the transformation of America's defense.
Well, I'm so glad you're doing this. You are spot on all of that, Senator. And I guess I want to get your take on how the backdrop has changed for defense. I mean, with new innovation, drone technology, lots of different ideas. How do you believe the battlefield looks different in the coming 5 years?
Well, there's really 3 big things that frame what's happening here today. First is the changing nature of our adversaries, and we see that with China and Iran and many others. It's a dangerous world. Second, the nature of warfare changing. We see that in Ukraine with drones, autonomy, robots. We see it with what's happening with Iran. And then finally, there's been apathy on the part of our defense establishment. It really hasn't kept up with the change. And I think President Trump has really brought a dramatic, and Secretary Hegseth, really a dramatic force for change. And this is meant to really build on that momentum. We have to expand the way we think about defense. We have over 9,000 defense-related companies in Pennsylvania. It's everything from powdered metals to shipbuilding to precision machining that goes into our spacecraft. So it's very important that we expand the definition of national security and defense to support it. It's important that we have these new entrants that are changing the nature of war. In Pennsylvania, we have Carnegie Mellon, where we have a huge capability in robotics and AI. We have Penn State University, where hypersonics, and the Navy has a big propulsion lab. There's all sorts of technological breakthroughs that need to be pushed forward and then integrated back into the force. And so today is about reinforcing the baseline, the foundation of our defense, like ammunition, large caliber, high caliber ammunition, like in Scranton, and also the frontier of new technology with satellites and space and AI and robots and of course drones. So both of those 2 things coming together here in Pennsylvania.
I love it. And it sounds like a great guest list with all the defense and tech names there in attendance. Senator, look, you and your colleagues returning today back in Washington after this summit for the final stretch of the legislative days ahead of the August recess. This will be really, literally, the last meaningful legislative window before the August recess and the midterm campaigns take center stage. In the middle of everyone mourning, Senator Lindsey Graham still reeling over that sudden death of the senator. Republicans are facing an uphill climb with this critical legislation needed to get passed and a little time to do it. You got the NDAA, Appropriations Bill, Save America Act, a potential third reconciliation bill. What are you expecting in terms of priorities in this short period?
Well, he'll be missed. He was a strong voice on all those topics that you mentioned. It'll make our jobs harder, but obviously we've got to fund the NDAA. We've got to make sure our defense capability, as reinforced here today, are fully funded so we can continue to project American strength around the world. So I think that's going to be the top priority. But the other two things you mentioned are really important. There is a window. It's very difficult in the Clarity Act. A lot of the compromises that are necessary have been made, but there's still some work to do. Right now, what's happening in the Senate is the Agriculture Committee and the Banking Committee are coming together on a joint text on the Senate side. So there's a possibility of a window for that before the August recess. And then Save America. Listen, Lindsey Graham was a strong voice on this. I've been a strong voice in this. Many others have. We need to keep the pressure on the Save America Act. The president is right to be so agitated that we're not moving forward on something that 85% of the American people want, and we can't get 60 senators to support it. So I think we need to keep the pressure on. Make sure the Democrats have to explain to the American people why they don't support something that's basic common sense, voter ID and proof of citizenship for voter registration. Those two things, as well as getting rid of mail-in ballots except when absolutely necessary for people who can't get to the polling sites. Those three things are common sense. Americans support it. We need to move forward on that in a variety of ways. Possibly a third reconciliation would be the way to do that, but we got to keep the pressure on.
Well, I mean, look, your margins are already thin now. We've lost Lindsey Graham. You also have questions around Mitch McConnell. So how are you feeling in terms of the ability to get things done with a dwindling majority?
Well, there's no doubt it's tough. I think the most important thing is to stay true to what we as Republicans have promised, what the president promised when we ran, what I promised as a candidate, which is a strong military. Our young men and women are in harm's way. We need to make sure we support them. And also keep coming back to the basic common sense things that Pennsylvanians and Americans want. So the Clarity Act is a separate category. I explained some of the dynamics around that. But I think funding the government, funding our defense establishment, and focusing on the Save America Act, I'm not suggesting it'll be easy, but I don't think, despite the tragedy of Lindsey's passing, that we can take the pressure off on those things. If he were sitting here with us today, he certainly wouldn't want us to do that.
Yeah, we're going to talk with your colleague, Cynthia Lummis, coming up on the Clarity Act, because it feels like it's a make-or-break moment in the Senate for the Clarity Act. But overall, in terms of your summit today, Senator, do you feel that there's an agreement? Do you have a blueprint in terms of how the money will be allocated with regard to defense spending, whether it be the supplemental that the Defense Department, the Department of War needs on the heels of this war, or the $1.5 trillion defense budget that the president wants for 2027? Do you have a vision in terms of how that money is spent and whether or not there's enough support for it?
Well, I think we have to build support for it. It's the most important thing in many ways. It's the single most important thing that government needs to do, is to be able to defend the security of the American people. And I think President Trump and his team have laid out a vision of some critical things that had really waned under previous administrations. And a lot of those things really come together in Pennsylvania. Shipbuilding is a critical part of America's future. The president's made that a huge priority. In Philadelphia, we're going from 1 ship a year to 20 ships a year at the Hanwha facility in the Philadelphia shipyard. That's a huge step forward. Submarines, in the submarine force, we have Rhodes, which is also based in Philadelphia, which is a manufacturer of many of the largest components for our current submarine fleet. The same with the nuclear reactors that are built in western Pennsylvania. So there's a huge emphasis on those areas. The other area where I think the administration has laid out a clear vision is this next generation warfare, which we're using with drone warfare and robots and robotics in the Middle East, and you're seeing that being used in Ukraine. And that's also an area where we have a lot of emphasis here in Pennsylvania. So we have to do sort of two things: traditional defense industries, things that have really apathied because of the lack of focus and the lack of money. We need to bring back that capability, and we also need to invest in next generation capability, because the face of war is changing, and it's changing really quickly.
Right.
Just to give you a sense of this, if you look at the Gulf War, where I was a soldier, and compare that to World War II, we thought that the changes were dramatic from during that time period. The nature of war has changed much more from the Gulf War to our current combat. The nature of technology, the degree to which the battlefield is shifting. So we need to catch up with that. We spend a lot of money, but we need to reallocate it to make sure it's spent in the right places. And then we need to increase our defense spending to make sure that we maintain that leadership across all the key areas, both next generation technology and traditional things like shipbuilding.
Of course, that's great analysis there. And you've seen so much, Senator, over your career. Thanks for your service to this great nation, as always. And thank you so much for today. We will be watching the summit. Congrats on an amazing guest list there. Thank you, Senator Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania. Stay with us. You will be right back. You're watching Mornings with Maria live on Fox Business.